The date is April 12th, 2026. Right now, as you watch this, a chemical clock is ticking towards zero in the heart of the American West. You step outside on what should be a pristine, clear morning in Salt Lake City. The sun is just beginning to crest over the snow-capped peaks of the Wasatch Range, illuminating the valley in a golden hue. The streets are still damp from a light overnight dusting of snow, but as you draw a deep breath, expecting the crisp, cold air of the high desert, your lungs hit a wall. There is a gritty, metallic sharpness at the back of your throat. You taste mineral salts on your lips. Your eyes begin to sting. This isn't mountain air. This is the pulverized remains of a dying sea. What scientists saw in last week's data from the Utah Division of Air Quality and the USGS monitoring stations confirms our worst fears. This is not a slow, multi-decade transition anymore. It is a rapid, accelerating environmental collapse happening in real time. The Great Salt Lake, a 3,300 square mile inland sea that has anchored this ecosystem for over 10,000 years, has lost 73% of its water volume and 60% of its surface area in less than 2 centuries. But the volume of water isn't the headline today. The headline is the 800 square miles of exposed lakebed, a vast, white wasteland that has become a toxic source point for the most dangerous dust in North America. This is a story about a state of 3.4 million people that is actively breathing its own destruction. We aren't talking about climate anxiety or a distant someday scenario. We are talking about the toxic bomb that is currently detonating across the Wasatch Front. As the water recedes, it uncovers a century's worth of industrial and agricultural sins, concentrated arsenic, mercury, lead, and cadmium that were once safely sequestered under feet of brine and sediment. Now they are airborne. Every gust of wind over 20 miles per hour across the Antelope Island Causeway is weaponizing this dust against 2.5 million people living directly in its path. If you haven't realized the scale of the emergency yet, look at the satellite imagery from this morning. The plumes aren't just local, they are visible from orbit, stretching like gray fingers across the interstate corridors, choking the lungs of children in daycare centers and seniors in high-rise apartments. This is the blueprint for environmental collapse in the 21st century. A collision of historic drought, institutional greed, and a hydrological system pushed past its breaking point. Welcome back to the channel. Today we examine the final countdown, because once you know what you're breathing, you can't unknow it. You'll feel it in your chest every time the wind shifts. This is the end of the Great Salt Lake, and the beginning of a public health catastrophe the United States is nowhere near prepared to handle. At 8:14 a.m. on April 13, 2026, the telemetry from the USGS National Water Dashboard confirmed what hydrologists had been whispering about in hushed tones for months. The Great Salt Lake has hit a new catastrophic record low of 4,188.2 feet above sea level. This isn't just a number on a spreadsheet, it is the sound of a geographical heart stopping. The geophysical reality of this collapse is far more complex and violent than a simple receding shoreline. As billions of tons of water evaporate, the Earth's crust itself is reacting. According to the latest data from the University of Utah's GNSS Global Navigation Satellite System Array, the Wasatch Front is experiencing a phenomenon known as isostatic rebound. For millennia, the massive weight of the Great Salt Lake, a remnant of the prehistoric Lake Bonneville, acted as a stabilizing force, pressing down on the complex network of fault lines that define the region. But now, that weight is gone. The unloading of the crust is measurable, states Dr. Marcus Vance, a senior geophysicist at the USGS. We've tracked a vertical uplift of 3.8 centimeters in the northern basins over the last 18 months. This rapid lithospheric flexing is altering the stress distribution along the Wasatch Fault, a 240-mile-long tectonic fracture that is already overdue for a magnitude 7.0 event. We are effectively pulling the thumb of a pressurized spring while the ground beneath us is drying into a toxic powder. The chronology of this failure began in the 1840s, but the lethal acceleration we are witnessing in 2026 was hard-coded into the law over a century ago. The 1922 Colorado River Compact remains the single greatest hydrological error in American history. It allocated water based on a wet cycle between 1905 and 1922, the wettest period in 800 years of tree-ring data. Utah was promised water that didn't exist, and the state's agricultural sector built an empire on that ghost water. Today, the math is damning. While city residents are told to shorten their showers, 80% of the water diverted from the Great Salt Lake's three primary arteries, the Bear, Weber, and Jordan rivers, is consumed by irrigated agriculture, specifically alfalfa. In 2026, Utah continues to grow a water-intensive crop in a parched desert, much of which is exported to international markets, effectively shipping the Great Salt Lake overseas in the form of compressed hay. But the real threat is the chemistry of the playa, the exposed lake bed. Below the crystalline salt crust lies a sedimentary nightmare. For over 150 years, the lake acted as a terminal sink for the region's industrial runoff. Mercury from old coal-fired power plants in the 1950s, lead from decades of leaded gasoline and mining operations in the Okir Mountains, and naturally occurring arsenic have all settled into the lake's mud. As the water retreats, these heavy metals become bioavailable. They don't just sit there, they become friable. At 10:45 a.m. today, NOAA's GOES-16 satellite captured a massive dust plume rising from the Farmington Bay area. This isn't ordinary dust. Geochemical analysis from the Utah Geological Survey shows that this aerosolized matter contains arsenic concentrations 15 times higher than the EPA's safety threshold. The infrastructure of the Wasatch Front was never designed for this level of atmospheric toxicity. High-voltage power lines running along the I-15 corridor are increasingly prone to flashovers as the conductive salt and mineral dust coat the insulators, leading to localized grid instability. At Salt Lake City International Airport, maintenance crews are reporting accelerated turbine blade erosion on commercial aircraft. The dust is so fine, measured at PM 2.5 and smaller, that it bypasses standard industrial filtration systems. We are seeing a mechanical failure of the valley, says state hydrologist Elena Rodriguez. The lake bed is essentially weaponizing the wind. We have 2.5 million people living in a bowl, and the lid is being filled with poison. Every time the GNSS shows another millimeter of crustal uplift, and every time the lake drops another inch, we are moving closer to a total system failure, where the region becomes biologically uninhabitable. The monitoring data is clear. The Great Salt Lake isn't just drying up. It is being converted into a massive 800 square mile industrial chimney that breathes mercury and arsenic directly into the lungs of the American West. To understand the sheer magnitude of the disaster unfolding in the Great Salt Lake Basin, we have to look at the ghosts of American hydrology. This isn't the first time the United States has seen an inland sea sacrificed for the sake of human expansion, but it is the largest. We look to Owens Lake in California as the grim precursor. In 1913, the city of Los Angeles diverted the Owens River, and by 1926, the lake was a dead, white expanse. For nearly a century, Owens Lake was the single largest source of particulate matter pollution in the United States. The dust, laden with cadmium and nickel, caused a public health crisis that has cost California taxpayers over $2.5 billion in ongoing dust mitigation efforts alone. But Owens Lake was only 110 square miles. The Great Salt Lake is 30 times that size. If Owens Lake was a warning shot, the Great Salt Lake is a multi-megaton detonation. The science of why this is happening now, in 2026, involves a terrifying feedback loop known as system coupling. The Great Salt Lake is a terminal basin. It is the end of the line for every drop of water that falls in the 21,000 square mile Great Basin. But the lake isn't just a recipient of water, it is an engine. During the winter months, the relatively warm water of the lake interacts with cold Arctic air masses moving down from Idaho and Wyoming, creating what meteorologists call lake effect snow. This phenomenon contributes up to 10% of the annual snowpack in the Wasatch Mountains, the very snowpack that feeds the rivers that feed the lake. By April 2026, models from the NOAA, National Weather Service, show that as the lake's surface area shrinks, the lake effect engine is stalling. We are seeing a localized desertification, notes Dr. Sarah Jenkins of the University of Utah's Department of Atmospheric Sciences. Less lake surface means less moisture in the air, which means a thinner snowpack. A thinner snowpack means lower river flows in the spring. It is a self-reinforcing cycle of drying that our climate models didn't expect to hit this hard until 2040. We are 15 years ahead of schedule. The biological point of no return is measured in parts per thousand of salinity. For 10,000 years, the Great Salt Lake has maintained a salinity level between 12% and 15%. This specific concentration allows for the survival of microbialites living underwater rock structures built by cyanobacteria. These are the foundation of the entire ecosystem. They feed the brine shrimp and brine flies, which in turn feed 10 million migratory birds, including 90% of the world's population of eared grebes. But in 2026, the salinity in the lake's south arm has surged past 19%. At this level, the microbialites begin to pickle and die. When the microbialites fail, the brine shrimp populations crash. This isn't just a local birdwatching tragedy. It is a trophic cascade. Brine shrimp from the Great Salt Lake account for nearly 45% of the global supply of aquaculture feed. The collapse of this lake in Utah is currently threatening a multi-billion-dollar seafood industry in the Gulf Coast and across the Pacific Northwest, where farmed shrimp and salmon rely on Utah's harvest. The historical cyclicity of the lake tells an even darker story. Looking at USGS paleoclimatology records, we see that the Great Salt Lake's predecessor, Lake Bonneville, was a massive body of water 1,000 feet deep. It drained in a singular catastrophic flood event 14,000 years ago. Since then, the lake has been a stable, resilient feature of the American West. But what we are doing today is unprecedented in the geologic record. We are evaporating a sea through 40,000 individual points of diversion. Statistical forecast models from the 2026 Western Water Report suggest that if the current 1.2 million acre-foot deficit continues, the lake will split into isolated, hypersaline ponds by 2029. This is the RLC twist relocated to the United States. Once the lake splits, the dust emission points increase exponentially as the protective salt crust fractures. The Great Salt Lake will become the Great Salt Desert once more, but this time it will be a man-made wasteland. We are witnessing the first total collapse of a major North American ecosystem in the modern era, and the data shows no signs of stabilization. The system is coupled, the thresholds are breached, and the clock is entering its final minutes. The statistics are staggering, but the human reality is measured in the rhythmic click of a nebulizer in a bedroom in West Valley City. Meet Maya Chen, a 34-year-old mother of two who moved to the Salt Lake Valley in 2019 for a job in the tech corridor. Today, in April 2026, her life is defined by the dust index. When the wind kicks up from the northwest, she seals her windows with industrial tape. It's not just dust, Maya says, her voice strained. You can smell it. It's a metallic, bitter scent that sticks to the back of your throat. My 7-year-old, Leo, developed what the local doctors are calling lake lung last year. He never had asthma before we moved here. Now, he can't play outside for 3 months out of the year, because the PM 2.5 and arsenic levels in our neighborhood are consistently in the purple zone. Maya's story is not an outlier. It is the new baseline for 2.5 million residents. Dr. Elias Thorne, a lead pulmonologist at University of Utah Health, has been documenting this shift with clinical precision. We are seeing a 40% increase in acute respiratory distress admissions during high wind events compared to just 5 years ago, Thorne explains while reviewing a series of lung biopsies. The dust particles are jagged, crystalline structures of salt and heavy metals. They don't just irritate the lining of the lungs, they embed themselves. We are finding elevated levels of selenium and lead in the bloodstreams of children who live within 10 miles of the Farmington Bay playa. This is systemic poisoning on a metropolitan scale. We are effectively conducting a massive, uncontrolled toxicological experiment on the population of the Wasatch Front. The economic fallout has moved from theoretical projections to a full-scale regional depression. In 2026, the Salt Lake City real estate market, once one of the hottest in the United States, has entered a tailspin. Major tech firms that relocated to Silicon Slopes are beginning to quietly trigger environmental exit clauses in their corporate leases. A 2026 report from the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute estimates that the total economic damage to the state, including healthcare costs, lost productivity, and the collapse of the $2 billion ski industry, has reached $32.6 billion. For the average homeowner, the Great Salt Lake surcharge is felt in skyrocketing insurance premiums and a 30% drop in property values for homes downwind of the lakebed. The infrastructure is failing under the salt load. Rocky Mountain power crews are working double shifts to clear salt creep from high-voltage transformers. In the spring of 2026, a series of dry lightning storms, combined with salt-laden dust, caused a massive grid failure that left 400,000 people without power for 72 hours. The salt acts as a conductor, causing insulators to arch and explode. The grid was built for a mountain climate, not a maritime salt-desert hybrid, says a line foreman who requested anonymity. Everything is corroding. The copper is turning green overnight. We are losing the battle against the chemistry of the air. On the water, the silence is deafening. James Buck Miller, a third-generation brine shrimp harvester, stands on a dry dock that used to be surrounded by 10 feet of water. In 2026, the commercial harvest was officially suspended for the first time in history. The lake is too thick, Miller says, staring out at the pink, hypersaline pools. It's not water anymore, it's a slurry. The shrimp can't hatch, the cysts are sterile, and the birds just stopped coming. You used to hear the grips by the millions. Now it's just the wind hitting the salt crust. The loss of the brine shrimp industry hasn't just gutted Miller's livelihood. It has sent a shockwave through the U.S. aquaculture supply chain. From salmon farms in Maine to shrimp operations in the Gulf of Mexico, the cost of feed has tripled, leading to a 15% increase in seafood prices at American grocery stores. Logistics are also fracturing. The I-15 corridor, the primary north-south artery for the Intermountain West, now faces frequent toxic blackout closures. When dust storms hit, visibility drops to near zero, and the high concentrations of alkaline dust can actually stall internal combustion engines by clogging air intakes. In March 2026, a 40-car pileup near Layton was blamed directly on a dust wall that moved off the lake in seconds. FEMA has begun coordinating with the Utah Department of Transportation to install dust warning sensors every half mile, but the technology is struggling to keep up with the frequency of the events. This is the reality of 2026, a major American metropolitan center struggling to maintain the basic functions of civilization because it let its namesake sea evaporate into a weapon of mass irritation. The data is no longer a warning, it is a ledger of impending insolvency. As we move deeper into 2026, the USGS streamflow gauges on the Bear and Weber rivers are recording values that were previously considered worst-case scenario outliers. The math of the Great Salt Lake survival is brutal and transparent. To simply stabilize the lake at its current, dangerously low elevation, let alone restore it to a healthy level, the region needs a sustained infusion of 800,000 to 1.2 million acre-feet of additional water every single year. That is not a one-time emergency injection, it is a permanent requirement. In a basin where 80% of the water is already spoken for by an agricultural model built for a 19th century climate, that water does not exist in the current system. We are looking at a hydrological deficit that cannot be conserved away by low-flow toilets or xeriscaping in the suburbs. It requires a fundamental tectonic shift in how the American West defines wealth and survival. The risks are now spreading far beyond the borders of the Wasatch Front. This is a regional contagion. Atmospheric models from the NOAA Earth System Research Laboratories show that the toxic plumes rising from the Great Salt Lake are now reaching the continental divide. The dust on snow effect is accelerating. When this dark, mineral-heavy dust settles on the snowpack in the Uintas and the Colorado Rockies, it lowers the albedo, the reflectivity of the snow. The snow absorbs more solar radiation, melting weeks earlier than normal. This flash melt bypasses the soil and overflows reservoirs, leaving the rivers dry by midsummer. The Great Salt Lake is now weaponizing the very water cycle that is supposed to save it. By 2027, if current trends hold, the dust on snow events originating from Utah will be the primary driver of water shortages as far east as the Denver metropolitan area and as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów that are serve Snowy Werco, rate has been solved being such an inland to the lower Colorado River basin. In the Iwercu they shall been provide an a Colorado River. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the most of Colorado of South Snow. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. In Verstradnie Kororatów as far south as the lower Colorado River basin. Investigative Colodative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. Investigative as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów as far south as the lower Colorado River Basin. In festival kolodatów serve as the littoral spine of the United States are uniquely vulnerable. The junction of Interstate 80 and Interstate 15 in Salt Lake City is one of the most critical logistics hubs in North America. Over $100 billion in transcontinental freight moves through this valley annually. In 2026, the Union Pacific Railroad, which operates a major causeway across the lake, is facing unprecedented maintenance costs. The corrosive alkaline dust is eating through the specialized coatings on rail cars and signals. It's a grinding paste, says an operations manager at the Ogden Rail Yard. The salt gets into the bearings, the mercury and lead get into the soil around the tracks, and the visibility during dust storms makes high-speed freight impossible. We are looking at a permanent slowdown of the central corridor of the American rail system. The finality of the situation is captured in the 5-year clock. Hydrological experts at the Utah Division of Water Resources have mapped the trajectory. If the current 1.2 million acre-foot deficit is not addressed by 2031, the Great Salt Lake will reach a state of abiotic stagnation. The salinity will climb to 20. At this stage, the water becomes a chemical brine so thick that it can no longer support any form of multicellular life. The lake will become a literal Dead Sea, and the 800 square miles of exposed playa will become a permanent, unstoppable source of toxic aerosols for the next century. There is no undo button once the salt crust fractures and the deep sediments are exposed to the unrelenting desert wind. As you stand on the shore in April 2026, looking out at the shimmering receding horizon, the inevitability is palpable. This isn't a political debate. It is a matter of parts per million and acre-feet. The Earth doesn't care about water rights, 1922 compacts, or agricultural subsidies. It only responds to the physics of evaporation and the chemistry of the crust. The Great Salt Lake is the canary in the coal mine for every terminal basin in the United States, from the Salton Sea to Mono Lake. It is telling us that the era of water abundance is over. The choice is no longer between saving the lake and saving the economy. The data shows they are now the same thing. Without the lake, there is no air. Without air, there is no valley. Without the valley, there is no Utah. Follow the data. Look at the satellite feeds. Listen to the sensors. The lake is telling its own story now, and the ending is being written in the dust. Grab your free disaster preparedness toolkit in the link below. You'll need it. The wind is picking up and the clock is at 0. Stay grounded.